are submitted and reviewed. And if your company moves on to receive the full evaluation, you will be notified by the SFMA. And that's really when the on-site evaluations will begin to be scheduled. The on-site evaluation is where the lead examiner and a team of examiners who are comprised of other manufacturers, maybe partners, but everybody has some experience. I would consider them experts maybe in their specific fields, but they all have experience in manufacturing. So when they come in to look at your organization, they have a pretty good idea of what they're looking for. And many of the examiners have been through this process several times.
Hey, Micah, real quick, I just want to know that somebody asked for a recording, so we started to record this. If anyone has an objection to that, we can take the recording off, so you can just let me know. But I wanted to let you know this was being recorded.
Okay, thank you, Matt. So the on-site evaluation takes about 3 to 4 hours. And that's including time for the examiners to conduct scoring, because they will conduct the scoring on site. So this is where this examiner team and the lead examiner will go through the 6 pieces of criteria and all of the elements that fall underneath that. So there's a lot to this, which we'll get to that shortly. Sorry, I lost my arrow. I'm moving the little screen around here.
There you go. You're good.
I'm good? Okay.
Yep.
So once again, this organizational profile serves as a guideline. It's a critical guideline for this examiner team in understanding, who you are. And it's very important that we fill this out and have this filled out to its fullest. And once again, the best practice, include all the members of the leadership team or of the organization that's going to have some input and impact on what this organizational profile will look like at the end of the day. So what are some of the criteria that goes into this? I get this question a lot. Well, I mean, yes, there is the basic information. We want to know your name, address, phone number, contact information, but we also want to understand your identity. What is your mission statement? What's your vision statement? What are the core values that you use to help guide your organization, through, good times and bad times? What role does technology and innovation play in the organization? Do you have an ERP system? Do you have a CRM? Do you have any type of automation? Kind of want to understand what this role is and how technology helps move your company forward. And strategy. I am a big strategy person. First, I'm big on mission and vision, and I'm very big on strategy. And I think the 2 of those elements work hand in hand. Your strategy should always be reflective of what your mission, vision, and core values are. But we want to understand this. We want to understand, what are the challenges that you have? What are those strategic challenges? What advantages does your company have in the marketplace? What's your differentiators? What separates you from your competition? Obviously, we understand, what do you make? What is your product? You don't have to get into specifics. We don't really care about customer names. Proprietary information, confidential information, not looking for that. Just really looking to understand, what market do you play in and what kind of products do you support that market with. So some additional things that'll be in the organizational profile. Want to understand process. And this is really what this whole awards assessment process is about, what the program is about. It is about your process, and not really talking about the manufacturing process. We're talking about, what is your decision-making process? Why and how do you go from point A to point B? So the strategic planning process is really important in that. How do you measure your business is something else that's really key. My favorite saying is, if you're not measuring it, you're just practicing it. So you have no idea, you have no benchmark if you're not measuring something, if you're improving or not. Benchmarking. Benchmarking is big. I know if I had $1 for every time I heard a company tell me, well, what we make is unique and nobody else does what we do. Okay, that's fine, but guess what? Your process is going to be the same no matter what you make. Whether you're making an anchor like Chris's company, or whether you're making some, high tech, device, medical device that's going into, uh, fix a, fix a valve in your heart. I mean, it doesn't matter. There's still a process that revolves around, the organization. Workforce investment strategies. How do you invest in your employees, the human capital? Most important thing, if you don't have people to do the job, can't make the product. And then the business really just doesn't exist without this. Operations and compliance. Want to understand the risks. What could potentially put your business at risk? How do you manage your supply chain? How do you rate or evaluate your vendors? What type of regulatory environment are you in? I mean, I mentioned medical devices. Most medical devices, most companies are going to be ISO 13485 certified, or they might fall under some FDA regulation that they have to follow, or, good manufacturing practices. There's a lot of things there. ISO, AS 9100 in aerospace. So we want to understand, what regulations do you have to follow? What industry certifications do you have to have? If you're in the defense space, I don't think I need to tell anybody in the defense space what's going on today, but the cybersecurity maturity model, CMMC, is the hot topic, and it's here. And I'm sure most of you folks understand that if you're in that arena. Any questions? I'll pause for a minute. I'm feeding everybody through a fire hose. Okay.
Again, any questions that come up along the way, feel free to put them in the chat and we'll get those addressed as well.
Thank you, Matt. Moving on to the kind of the evaluation side of it. Sure, there's a lot of concern. If I'm a small company, how do I compete against a Lockheed Martin? I don't want to say that you couldn't, but the reality is what we do is we separate, we have 5 main categories and then 1 additional category. And so we group everything by employee headcount. What you're seeing here, the micro giants 1 to 30, breakthroughs 31 to 75, Mavericks, and so on. This was the 2025 model. A lot of this depends on the number of companies that accept the nominations and turn in their organizational profiles. So, this grouping could potentially change from year to year. We could end up with a large number of companies under 20 employees, and they may be the micro giants, 1 to 20. And then that throws, that changes the dynamic of everything from there on out. But the 5 main categories are strictly based on your employee headcount and I need to stress this too, at the South Florida facility. So if you are a multinational company or you have several facilities over the state, if you have 1 in Pensacola and 1 down in Miami, we're not evaluating Pensacola. So you also have to keep that in mind. We're only evaluating the South Florida organization, and we're only looking for how many employees are at that, that particular division. The final category is called the Grand Elite. And so should you be fortunate enough, to win the award, in the past, companies had to sit out 2 full years before they could participate again. So we listened to the customer, the voice of the customer, and a lot of companies that won wanted to continue to participate. So we created a category specifically for those winners of the previous 2 years. And now this is where companies of 15 employees could go up against a company with 300 employees. And just to give you an idea, I'll throw this out there. Yes, a larger company won the Grand Elite. Horbiger won the Grand Elite last year. But the runner-up was, if I'm not mistaken, Chris, I think Fortress Anchors was the runner-up, and you have what, 11 employees? Oh, you're on mute.
We have 12.
12,
Yeah.
okay.
Look at
So,
that.
and they were the runner-up. And I'll be honest with you, they weren't far from being the top dog. They were very close. So can the smaller companies compete against the larger companies? Yes, you can. It's all about process. Remember that. So the assessment categories, just reviewing this again, leadership and strategy, technology innovation, workforce, customer focus, measurement, and operation. Under each of these categories, there's going to be a set criteria that across the board that the examiners will be looking for. So you probably are sitting there asking, why should my company participate? Well, you want to drive organizational excellence, number one. You want that continuous improvement process. So this assessment process will identify your strengths, your opportunities, and really provide you a roadmap for continuous improvement and competitive advantage. So along with these strengths and opportunities are going to come recommendations, from the lead examiner who will be writing the assessment at at the end of the process. So that's really where the rubber meets the road, and this is the real big advantage in participating in this, is getting a team of people to come in and really evaluate your company and provide an unbiased, holistic look at who you are and what you do well, and where are those areas of improvement. You want to also gain some industry recognition. I mean, being recognized as a finalist, or even better yet, a winner, is going to elevate your company's reputation in South Florida, but not only that, also the state. This is going to help you attract, some top talent and hopefully some new business opportunities. Last year, we just finished the recognition of excellence, and there were 752 people at the awards dinner, Matt.
Yeah, 732.
732. Okay.
Yeah,
So,
it's
you know,
huge.
and it's a huge event in South Florida now, and it's getting a lot of recognition. It's getting a lot of media, publicity. There are, lots of very influential people that come to this dinner. There's some state legislators that come here, along with, a host of companies and manufacturers, all from all around South Florida. So it's a great to participate in this event. Benchmarking against your peers. So, this is a good one too, and I think this even is a little bit more on the other side of it. I think as an examiner, you really get to see this. But now you're going to really understand, against companies your size, how do I stack up? And also, how do I measure up against companies that are larger than me? That's the data-driven process of this. Everything that is compiled, you'll get to see that comparison. How do I compare against my group? How do I compare against the group above me? And when you start looking at that, you'll start seeing also, what are those areas potentially just in the scoring could you improve on? You'll see maybe your leadership numbers are, 20 or 30 points lower than, let's say, a group four. If you're a group two and, looking at a group four, you could be 20 or 30 points spread um, between the scores. Makes you wonder, what are they doing that I'm not doing? And that's what really sparks a good conversation, and even potentially getting into that company and, getting some feedback from them as well. Speaking of feedback, the assessment at the end of this is a very comprehensive assessment. As I just mentioned, the scoring, it's a very good graphical showing, lots of numbers. If you're into the data, there's a lot of numbers in it, but it also provides a whole written assessment on your strengths and opportunities and recommendations, as I mentioned before. And it's just a huge, huge opportunity. So how have we fared in the past? So since 2022, the financial impact to companies that have participated and received these assessments has been over $450 million. And this financial impact could be in the form of new sales, retained sales, what kind of investments you've made, to the organization as a result of this. cost savings also. So it's a big number. Um, on the job side, how many jobs were positively impacted? Over 1,500. So it's really, it's impacting a lot of jobs, impacting a lot of companies. And, once again, this is on a 3-year mark, and I don't think the 2025 is actually in. So you're looking at 22, 23, and 24. The 25 numbers have not been reported yet. So obviously this number is going to be higher as we continue to grow.
And Micah, that's probably I'm gonna do a quick estimate. That's 3 years, right? Um, that's roughly about 61. So if you go back to that slide, Micah, real quick, the previous slide. So 2025 is not included in that because it lags. That's about 61 companies. So when you divide the math by 61, that's some pretty significant positive impact. And it's a small amount. I mean, 3 years, 61 companies. So that's pretty substantial. So,
Now,
yeah,
I mean, obviously, if you're a smaller company, that the number, isn't going to be that large. But when you start, and Chris will tell his story shortly, when you look at what that impact is to those businesses, it's a huge impact.
yeah.
If if you're a $2 million company and you can double your money in a couple of years, thanks to, participating in this and getting that feedback and doing the follow up and working with the SFMA in Florida makes on making it happen. Doubling your business in a matter of 2 years, I think I would take that bet any day. So I've driven this home a lot about the assessment. And actually I just talked a lot about this, you know, so after the award event in June, that's when the assessments will start being put together. We don't, reveal anything earlier than that, obviously. You won't find out if you're the winner or not until you attend the recognition of excellence ceremony. But we will start delivering those assessments as early as July. As they start getting put together. There's a lot of work that goes into it, but this does include all of your scores across all the categories. So you'll have a very detailed view of that, the comparisons against the field, as I mentioned, and then of course the details of your company's strengths, opportunities, and recommendations. This is the real value in participating in this process.
And Micah, if I mean, this is no cost, to a company go through that, right? So there's no cost financial in terms of outlay to do it. If a company would have to, go out on the street retail and, bring in all the consultants that would have to come in and do that, what could you equate to as a dollar value on that? I think you
I
mentioned
mean,
it maybe earlier, but like my
realistically, yes, this isn't as large as the Baldrige. I mean, they do a lot. I probably would rather go through an IRS audit than go through the Baldrige Award, to be honest with you. But the real value is probably 15 to $20,000. I mean, you think if you had a consultant firm come in and do what this team does for free, and it's donation of their time. I mean, you have manufacturers, that are coming in. You have affiliate partners that are coming in, and the time that they spend and the fuel and the time away from work and everything. That's one thing, but the value is probably 15 to $20,000 at least. And
All right,
so
thank
it's
you.
it's a huge value for nothing.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I will mention this on the examiners if there's any concern. We do vet the examiners. The examiners do go through a training process every year. Even those that are experienced, because there's always some changes, and we go through some reviews. But there is a training process to go through this to be an examiner. And when we bring the examiner team, or the examiners choose the companies that they want to examine, we're very diligent on making sure that those examiners are not, going into a competitor, just to help that, and that there's always that option. participant gets to see the examiner team and where they're from. And if they feel that there is some, potential conflict of interest or competitive, or something of a competitive nature, they can always reach out to the lead examiner and ask to have that person excluded. And trust me, it's happened many times in the past, and there won't be any offense taken, by the examiner. There's a lot of understanding in that. So one of the biggest things I always get, when I, would solicit companies or talk to companies about participating in this, and I think Chris will attest to this. I always hear that, well, we're not really ready to go through this. If you're telling me you're not ready to go through the process, you recognize already that you really are ready to go through it because you feel that you have, some, underlying issues there that probably would hold you back from being a winner. That's the whole idea of this. I mean, it's great to win the award, but it's better to have this team of examiners come in and, provide the details, provide this assessment at the end, because they're going to see things probably that you don't see because you're in the day-to-day operations every day. So I think that's really important. If you feel that you're not ready, think about it again. You really are. And I love the quote by Chris. Chris, I'm going to read it. I'm going to steal your thunder before I cut you loose here on the team. Uh, this experience gave us a rare behind the scenes look into what makes a great manufacturer and what holds others back. Even more valuable than the award itself has been the journey. Participating as a contestant, learning from the feedback we got from the examiners, and more recently serving as an examiner evaluating other companies across our region. Great quote by Chris. Everything he said is absolutely true. And, and hopefully for those you folks that are on here that have not participated before, once you participate and you see it, and you want to be an examiner the following year, you're more than welcome to be part of the team. So with no further
Thank you,
ado,
Chris.
yeah, I stole a little bit of your thunder there, buddy, but I'm going to let you talk about your experience and tell us what, really what this process, meant to you and your company.
I
Yeah,
love that
absolutely.
picture, Chris.
Uh,
It's just
yeah.
champion.
It's one of the
It's
few
pretty
times they
cool.
catch me in a suit is at the annual meeting. I have one for that occasion. So first I guess I'll give you a little bit about my background. I believe most people who are on this call have backgrounds in business. You might have a background in engineering. My background was in bodybuilding. I was a competitive bodybuilder and powerlifter, and I trained athletes for 15 years out in California. That was my dream. I dreamed of living out of my car, living on Venice Beach, and that's what I did for 15 years. And uh, there was a point where I got sick. I had autoimmune disease, and I couldn't do that anymore. And I had this gentleman that I had gone to school with previously. He wanted to climb Mount Everest, so he reached out to me for a plan. And he saw me. I'd gone from 220 pounds down to 148 pounds. And he saw me on the Zoom call and he was like, "Hey, what's going on with you?" And I said, "Look, I'm probably going to have to figure out something else because I can't really make money off of my image anymore." And he said, "Why don't you come work for me? I got this company, Fortress Anchors. You'll be a part-time sales guy." And so I started out as a part-time sales guy with them. And 2 weeks later, COVID-19 happened. And uh, our biggest customer said they weren't going to pay us for 6 months. And so I had to create a direct to consumer program. He liked the program. So he moved me out to Florida, made me director of sales and marketing. And then as the COVID boom happened in the marine industry, all of a sudden things started taking off. The general manager at the time wasn't purchasing material, wasn't projecting, wasn't doing what he was supposed to do. So the owner came in and he fired that guy and he pointed at me and he said, "You're the new GM, figure it out." And it was at that point where I was like, okay, I have a lot to learn right now. And the whole thing was like drinking from a fire hose. And that's when I reached out. I was looking for help and I reached out to SFMA. And they came to me. I joined at first, and a few months later, they came to me and said, "Hey, we've got this process. It's called the manufacturer of the year process." And if you could see my factory at the time, the factory floor was a mess. We didn't have a ton of employees. We were still working out of that hole, where we were down to no raw materials, no work in progress. We were still trying to figure that out. Um, we had no ERP, we had no systems, no processes, nothing. Um, but I knew we needed help, so we participated in the process. And then I remember that first exam we went through. Um, I had filled out the company profile, and Micah comes in, and the first question he says, he's what's your mission, vision, and values? And I was like, mission, vision, and values. Yeah, I was blank. I didn't really know what that was. And I could see Micah kind of steaming out of the sides of his temples a little bit, but it was, we went through, we had these examiners come through, and at the end of that process, I knew we weren't going to win, but we got a packet, and in that packet was my roadmap, and that's what I was really after, a roadmap toward improvement. And so we worked at it and worked at it and worked at it, and we went from being in a hole with 6 months of lead times to having one of the highest fulfillment rates in the marine industry. We had a 99% fulfillment rate during a time when supply chain was a huge problem for everybody else. We continued to improve. We built our own ERP system. We we made massive improvements over the next year, and the next year we came in runner up. And then I got another packet, and that was my roadmap for the next year. We built those mission, vision, values. We had them hanging in our cafeteria over here. We started training our personnel. We started developing systems and processes for everything. And little by little, every week we would improve on something. And 2024, we won the Micro Giants category. And since that time, it's still been continuous improvement. I mean, Micah and his team, they've helped us out so much. And I honestly don't know where I'd be without SFMA or Florida Makes, and without Micah, because he's helped us to build what we've built here today. And at this point right now, we're the number one selling anchor in the aftermarket. We've expanded internationally. I just got an order that was half of our yearly average in Europe, in one order. And so we're on a road to massive success over here. I've got a training I'm going to with my team in about 20 minutes. We're gonna start taking them through lean principles, and all this is because of this process. Now, my advice to all of you is, you might be thinking to yourself, "Hey, I'm not ready." I wasn't ready. My team wasn't ready. The factory definitely wasn't ready. But that's not what it's about. This isn't about the award itself. What you get out of this is tens of thousands of dollars worth of consulting for absolutely free, for the time you put into that company profile and the time you put into the exam. You're going to get so much out of this. And, it is definitely the best thing that I've ever done, and the best thing that this company's ever done. And I'd say it's one of the only reasons why we're here today, and having the success we are. So if you're thinking about it, if you're on the fence, do it. There is no downside in this for you at all.
Thank you, Chris. Great testimonial, and I think the biggest thing, I mean, I'll say this, looking from my side, you guys put a lot of work into this. Once again, I mentioned it right at the beginning. You get out of it what what you put into it, and you follow the roadmaps. You continue to ask for advice, which is really important. It's a journey. This is something that really never ends. It changes the culture of your organization, which is huge. And I think that was something, that's really where the mission, vision, core values come into play, is once you make that cultural shift and everybody is on board, sky's the limit. And you have an organization behind you, two organizations really, behind you that are going to help you along this journey. And that's what it is. It really never ends. It's constant, it's constant work if you want to succeed. And Chris, kudos to you and your team. You've gone above and beyond, what it takes, and you're really the quintessential testimonial for this process, because um, you guys have done wonders, and you're 11 or 12, I'm sorry, 12 people. So, this is a great testament to it. Thank you, Chris, so much for coming on and talking about your experience and where this has led you and your company.
Thanks, Chris. And Mike, I think that, and someone had put in the chat, if you're thinking if you're not ready, what's the response? So I think Chris probably answered that and you answered that. So thank you. Whoever put that in the chat, thanks for that question. Great question. We get that a lot. People look at it and go, oh, we're not ready for this. Well, wait a second. Yeah, you are. And it can only do wonders for your company. So
Exactly. So diving in a little bit into, to the categories and the criteria from a leadership and strategy side, these are just some of the topics that we're going to look at. Right at the top of the list: mission, vision, core values, effective communication, communication up and down the ladder, accountability. Accountability is huge. Everybody, from leadership needs to hold each other accountable, down to the shop floor being, held accountable and held accountable for each other. Mentoring, being mentored. It's great to be a leader, but great leaders, become mentors, and they're looking for the next generation of leaders in the organization, but they don't get there, just by, being smarter education. All great leaders have mentors behind them that are helping them, and bouncing ideas off of their mentors to say, hey, is this a good idea or not? The roles of organizational leadership. You're really looking at, you know, what is your job basically? What is your role in the organization? How do you move it forward? Legal, ethical behavior, risk and succession planning. That's huge. There's a lot of companies that have, we call it tribal knowledge. You have that one guy. So, I mean, this isn't just for leadership on the succession planning. This could be, that tool and die maker that sits in the background that nobody ever sees, that's, 65 years old and may just up and retire one day. And, you have to, take care of all of those things, and, look at those critical positions within your organization, that if you lost this person, what does that mean to you? Everybody needs to have a backup. What is your societal and environmental impact? That's a big one too. And of course, the strategic planning process, tying that strategic plan and your roadmap as an organization, tying that back to your mission, vision, and core values, and really creating a culture of continuous improvement and success. Next category is customer focus. The culture of the customer within your organization. How much does everybody know what your customers do? Smaller organizations, actually, this is a little easier for smaller organizations than larger organizations. But, I think it's key that, that the employees, that everybody really understands that product and what it does. Listening to the voice of the customer, huge. What does the customer want? What does the market demand? What are they looking for? This is where, you start looking at new product development and innovation. Customer satisfaction. That's kind of a piece of voice of the customer. What is the customer happy? Are they not happy? And if they are happy, what can you do to make that the standard throughout the organization? This is this is something very measurable that everybody should be doing. Customer and market definition. This is, what are those industries that you serve in? Who are your customers? Are you diversified? Do you have too many eggs in one basket? We're going to look at these things. Customer engagement, internally and external. So external customer engagement is really easy. I mean, that's kind of like your whole sales team. What is your process for working with the customers that are ultimately buying your product? But the internal customer, a lot of people overlook. You're sending product from one process, operational process to the next. What's that communication within the organization itself? Um, the accountability for, obviously for customer and market growth, really understanding your competition and what differentiates you from your competition. Big keys. Technology, innovation, innovative thinking is a process. I mean, how do you approach innovation and technology as an organization? How do you integrate, what is your plan for integrating that? Do you recognize that, hey, I have some operations that, maybe to improve our quality, we could, involve some automation here to make things better. Improving your on-time delivery as well, creating some capacity. How does technology innovation enhance the customer value? What is the strategy for integrating this? How do you collect the data and what do you do with the data? Collecting the data is one thing, but if it just sits there in a box somewhere, it doesn't do the organization any good. You need to be looking at that data, using that as a foundation for continuous improvement. Cybersecurity measures. I mentioned cybersecurity earlier, but it's not just for the defense space and government contracting space. This is becoming a bigger and bigger issue around the world. I mean, these hackers are really sophisticated. So just some general cybersecurity training for your companies and understanding, what is phishing. When you get these crazy text messages, hey, I need you to go down to this is the CEO. I need you to go down and pick up a gift card for $200 and send it to me. And we get those a lot. Just little things like that can go a long way. Just some education on what's happening out there. And then how does technology and innovation support your employees? How does it make them better? Measuring. Measurement criteria, I said it earlier, if you're not measuring it, you're just practicing it. But you also have to measure what is important to the organization. And all of this should really be tied back to that strategic plan again. What are your KPIs? How do you manage those KPIs? And once again, what do you do with the data? Excuse me. How do you benchmark this data against, the industry, against your competition? Very important. Communicating, communicating these KPIs is key. How do you communicate them? Is it just a verbal, hey, this is what we did yesterday? Or do you have Gantt charts up on the board? Or do you have monitors that show real-time data? There's a lot of ways to communicate it. The more sophisticated the communication is, the better you'll be as an organization because you'll be able to react faster to that data. That kind of falls into the organizational knowledge. You validate the data collected, which, the more sophisticated your data collection is, it's actually just by default, it's going to be validated more. I mean, if you have somebody writing things down in a logbook, that's subjective. A lot of things can happen to that logbook. And then, of course, using all of this data for continuous improvement activities. The workforce. Do you measure employee happiness? That's a big one. Especially in today's market, it's hard to find good talent, and when you have that talent, you want to keep them and you want to keep them happy. Sometimes it's not all about the dollar. Sometimes it's more about advancement, and it's how am I helping this employee grow and develop their skills and become maybe eventually becoming a leader in the organization. Find out what makes them happy and what they want. What are the capabilities? What's the capacity of the workforce? So this is really down to training. How are you training your employees? What are you training them on? The recruiting and onboarding process, big. I'm going to go back to mission, vision, values. I think you start integrating and you start creating that culture around your mission and vision. Your recruiting and onboarding process should be no different. If you're going to bring somebody in, that doesn't believe in your mission, they're going to be a problem. End of story. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Workplace health and safety goes without saying. Safety really should be first. You want to make sure that everybody comes to work and leaves the same way they came in. Driving performance, once again, that's a little bit, that's kind of ties back to measurement. Do the employees understand the goals, their own individual goals as well as the organizational goals, and how is their role impact, those goals and the results. Workforce development, once again, that's kind of coming back to training. And workforce engagement, really important that we're always out there, talking to the workforce, understanding what their needs are, because that ties back to everything there, and especially tying back to employee happiness. And the last one, operations, this encompasses a lot of things. We're going to look at supply chain. How do you meet your customer and market requirements? How do you manage your internal and external resources? Do you have a continuous improvement plan, a continuous improvement team? What drives continuous improvement in your operation? Number 5 is a big one. Do you understand your costs? You need to understand that cost to ensure that you're profitable and the company will be sustainable. Operations, revenue recognition, tying that back into the cost as well, but you need to be able to pivot. If, something happens in the industry, do you have the operations to be able to pivot and maybe go into a different market, supply, actually produce and supply a different product, to expand your own portfolio. And then business continuity and risk. We live in Florida, folks. Hurricanes happen. Do you have a hurricane plan? That's an easy one, but it's not only a plan, it's, also recovery. How do we recover if we have, if we get hit with a hurricane? But it goes beyond just hurricanes. There's a lot of things. We had COVID, which was an outlier. I mean, Lord, let's hope that doesn't happen again. Active killers. It happens. It's happening more and more that you have, somebody coming in and, how do you deal with that? How do you deal with fires? So there's a lot of things there that you have to look at for business continuity and risk and ensuring that the company stays sustainable. Understanding the scoring system a little bit. There's, between these 6 categories, there's 44 questions. Under these 44 questions, and this was last year, this could change this year. Out of these 44 questions, there's 3 components that are evaluated under each question, which comes to a total of 132 scores per examiner. You have a team of 6 examiners coming in. That's a lot of scores. So when we talk about it being data driven, it's data driven, and it's hard to, and believe it or not, I shouldn't say it's hard. It seems like every year we always have some close calls where, first and second in a category is 10 points apart. And it's hard to imagine that when you have, a total of 9, roughly 900 is the highest score. So real quick, I mentioned the elements. The questions are easy themselves, but what are those elements that we're looking at? Each question is comprised of 3 things: approach and deployment, integration, and learning. So approach and deployment is really, I'm just going to simplify it. Do you have a process? How do you carry out that process? And, and how relevant is it throughout the organization? So that's kind of the bottom line there. Integration, and, that's really the harmonization of this process. How, is it in the blood, let's say, of the employees of the operations? Once again, the more sophisticated you have, there's less, I guess, human interference, if you will. So if you're collecting data electronically versus a logbook, the integration is going to be higher. It's going to be more sustainable. It's going to be more repetitive. It's going to be more standardized. And that's really what this part is all about. Learning's the tough one, though. You're collecting data on all of this. You're understanding all of this. I mean, some of it you may not be physically, collecting a number on, but it's there. When there is a change, how are you learning from it? How are you using changes in the process, changes in the data? How are you using this to drive continuous improvement and sustainability in your organization? Yeah, that's a tough score to really get a big number on, is the learning. Scoring is conducted on a number, on a number of 1 to 5. 1, essentially, you really don't have a process at all. It's not visible. There's nothing there. There's nothing sustainable. 2, is a little bit better. You have a process. It is kind of visible, but the sustainability part isn't there. 3 is status quo. You're doing what everybody else does. You haven't really separated yourself from, Joe's Crab Shack down the street. It's not a detriment. It just means that you're doing what everybody else does. 4, now you're starting to lean a little bit into innovation. You're starting to use some of this technology. You're starting to use innovative thinking, because, getting a 4 doesn't mean you have to have automation. This could be just you thinking outside of the box as an organization, to be successful at a process. And a score of 5, I'm a tough cookie. If I'm an examiner, I don't give too many 5s. You have to knock my socks off. And this really means you are the gold standard. You are the benchmark. You are the company that I'm going to say, hey, you folks need to go in and look at Matt's pen and pencil manufacturing company and see what he's doing. It may not be anything related to what you manufacture, but there may be that process and how they're achieving success is what they're doing well and what they're the benchmark at. So for the on-site evaluation, the expectation, once again, it's about a 3 to 4 hour process. It's going to be a deep dive into your company, covering all of the categories of the award, all of the questions. We'll be conducting interviews. It does involve a tour, a plant tour, because sometimes we get a lot of questions answered just by looking. And obviously, if you have any, if you have any rules or regulations on the tour that we need to follow in the way of safety or so forth, we'd like to know that in advance so we can advise the examiner team. Review documentation, validate everything, and expanding upon your organizational profile. These on-site evaluations will take place between January and the end of April. And once again, it'll be an examiner team, hopefully of at least 6 examiners with the lead examiner. But we can conduct it with less, but we like to have at least we like to have 5 or 6 because it makes the scoring very just spreads it out a little bit. The awards ceremony for 2026 is going to be held on June 25th, the Charles Dodge City Center in Pembroke Pines. And this is going to be presented by Ronstad. And this is a must-attend event for all suppliers, manufacturers, participants, and really anybody who's a champion of the manufacturing industry. It's a great event. If you've never done it, you're really missing out. I love going to this event every year, and it really showcases and recognizes excellence in manufacturing and embodies what really the cream of the crop in manufacturing around South Florida. And also don't want to miss out on this. We have the Employee of the Year awards as well, separate from this, and Matt can always talk about that at another time. But you want to recognize your employees for, and really for their success as well. So it's a fun night out. It's an amazing night out. And please join us next year for that.
We like to call that the manufacturers not at the Oscars. We can't use that publicly, but that's, if you can imagine, that's what we try to replicate. It's really fun. So
awesome. So just a little review before we wrap up. Nominations are open right now. We'll be accepting nominations through December 5th. If you self-nominate, you can expect to get the organizational profile. I mean, we're assuming that if you self-nominate that you want to go through the process, so there may not be that extra step in accepting or declining. Then you want to prepare your organizational profile as early as possible. Get it in. It needs to be in by December 15th. Once your profile has been reviewed and accepted, the SFMA will start scheduling, reach out to you, start scheduling the evaluations for some time between January and April. And then, of course, the Recognition of Excellence Awards ceremony will be on June 25th, where we'll recognize all of the finalists, the winners of both Manufacturer of the Year and Employee of the Year. And Matt?
And Mike, no, thank you for this. This was wonderful. And just a point. So at the ceremony in June, the winners are announced for and the runner-up, but they're announced for the very first time that evening. So if a company is a finalist in this process, that means that they are obviously, but they're in contention to win the award. So we, all the finalists come every year and they bring their teams. It's really a fun evening. But know that if you're a finalist, you're going to that ceremony and you are in contention to win. But thank you, Micah, for that. We love to, it is 10 o'clock, but if anybody has any questions, we'd be happy to answer them now. If you do, let us know. Any questions at all? If you're a company that was nominated, any questions? If maybe you're thinking about nominating a company, please ask your questions as well. I mean, if you're not a manufacturer on this call and you want to, or if you are, but if you want to nominate another manufacturer, it's a great way to provide some real value. And I always like to say, nominate your suppliers that are manufacturers down here in South Florida. Because think about it. If your suppliers are local, manufacturing here, they can only get better. That in turn helps you as a manufacturer. So nominate your suppliers. We always love to say that. But any questions at all that we can answer for anybody?
Mike, let me ask a quick question. If I nominate someone, just go over real quick. I know you did it already, but real quick again, what do they have to fill out? How much effort is involved in saying, yes, I want to move forward?
Well, Pete, they'll have to, if they accept the nomination, they have to fill out the organizational profile. The organizational profile will be available via a link. So
Okay.
it's an online form that they would complete. I would advise they probably need a good, if they have
An hour or so.
they're gonna need probably a couple of hours. If they want to do a really good job, they might need a couple of days. So if I'll say this, if there are companies out there that would like to see those questions prior to, we can provide those, because once you go into the link, you really can't, when you go from one page to the next, it won't advance, or it'll advance it, but then you're gonna have a bunch of blanks on there. So if you want to see the questions in advance, reach out, let us know, and we can provide those questions for you so you can see what they are. Then you can prepare your organizational profile for submission, by getting your teams together and going over everything, and then filling out the online form.
Right.
Mike,
And that's actually that's a learning experience in itself. The org
Oh, yeah.
profile. We streamlined it a little bit, Mike, this year, so we reduced it a little bit, so it's not as daunting, but a good couple hours. I'm sorry, Belinda, you were going to mention something?
yes, upon acceptance, I have been sending out a preview of the profile questions.
Right.
So that way they can study it a bit, formulate their answers, and then they'll go into the link and can fill out.
That's
the
awesome.
form.
Okay,
That's
perfect.
perfect.
That's
Yep,
actually a really good idea to do it that way, because then everybody knows what they're getting into.
Yeah, that's perfect. And again, I mean, going through that as a team, I mean, SFMA, we went through it last year. Well, we didn't compete because we're not a manufacturer, but we just, had some judges, and we as a team went through it, right? And everyone participates, and it's a great eye-opening experience, because that's going to be one learning process, right? And you can take away some things from that. And then again, the org profile, it's it just helps the examiners learn more about your company before walking in. As Mike mentioned, if someone just puts company name, address, that's it, and submits it, well, that doesn't tell anybody anything, and nobody really should expect to be moved on from there. But if you fill it out and you have some good information, it's fine. So, but great question, Pete. Thank you, Belinda, for that clarification. Well, if nothing else, we thank everyone for your time today. For those that got nominated, we look forward to seeing you through the journey. For those that are thinking about accepting if you've been nominated, please reach out to us with any questions you may have. Even if you were nominated and you accepted, reach out to us, any questions you may have. And, the fun will begin in January. It's a great time of the year. So we appreciate everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Matt, can you stay on for a minute?
Yeah.
Okay.